So your website is obviously part of your online presence. In a sense, that's your core hub where it should connect and interconnect with all the other aspects of your online presence. Your social media accounts, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc. Those I usually say are more for member engagement. The people who are following you on those platforms are most likely going to be already connected with your church in some way, shape, or form, whether they're active members, family of active members, or people who attend your youth group, but their family might not go to the church, different things like that. They're usually connected to your church in some way. So these are the things that are more of like the fun, engaging things behind the scenes, talking about member events, those types of things. Your video platforms like YouTube and Vimeo, a lot of churches will use these for hosting videos that are made for different purposes, or their live stream, or different things like that. You can also, especially with YouTube, do some of like the reels and different things like that. It can act as, in a sense, a social media platform. But a lot of them for church use, a good practice is YouTube should be some sort of live stream if you're incorporating live stream, because that's where a lot of people might go to look for it. A note between the two, if you're embedding on your website, you can use YouTube. The hard part about using YouTube is they usually will have an ad pop up at the end of the video, and you don't have any control over what ad pops up at the end of the video. And that ad is usually catered towards the viewer. So whatever their history, search history, watch history is. So that ad could be anything. So just something to be aware of for YouTube. You used to be able to specify, it would show ads for more videos on your channel, but I think they took that away like a year or two ago. Vimeo is nicer in the sense that you can embed on your site, fully brand it to your church branding and colors and all that kind of stuff, and they don't show ads at the end of the video. So for embedding on a website, I tend to prefer Vimeo if your church has the budget to pay for the account. Vimeo is a paid-for platform for most uses that are actually useful. I think they cap you at like 5 gigabytes total or something like that of content if you don't pay for it. So if it's useful, you're probably going to end up paying for Vimeo. YouTube is free, but like I said, you can't really control the ads. Apps is another part of your online presence. Usually, like I said, I would recommend utilizing an app for something like sermon notes or member engagement or different things like that, because your members are going to be the ones that download the apps. And if you are incorporating an app, be intentional about letting people know that you're incorporating an app. A lot of churches have one that has useful information and good access to sermon notes and prompting questions, but they never tell people they have it, so most of the congregation doesn't use it. So if you are spending the money and spending the time to incorporate an app, make sure your congregation knows it and be intentional about kind of getting them to engage in it. Member portals, this, as the name suggests, is specifically for members. Sometimes directories are on these things, giving platforms are on these things, different like children's ministry signups or youth ministry signups. Those are the kind of things that you might have in a member portal. This is just the space for people to know that they're signing up for different things that are part of the church that you generally advertise to your members. Your giving platform can be separate from all those. It can be combined with some of them, but it is, especially in nowadays culture, good to have a online giving platform in some way, shape, or form. They have paid for options, they have free options, so you can find what you need. But I definitely recommend having it. We worked with a church that incorporated online giving in 2020 at the outset of COVID, and had their biggest giving year in the history of their church during 2020. So it makes a big difference, just allowing people to give online. Some options for giving platforms, just so you're kind of aware of some general options. You can usually combine it with your with a member portal or church management software, they usually offer that kind of stuff. Your website hosting platform might have something integrated. A lot of the times you want to look at the fees associated, because usually they will take a portion. So a lot of the platforms, if you're giving through a credit card, they usually take a certain amount, like 60 cents or something like that, and then 3% on top of that of the purchase or gift. And then for bank drafts, they usually cut it to 1%, but there's usually some sort of percentage taken off. I think some church-specific giving platforms either mitigate that cost and lower it a lot, or they cut it completely. You just have to be aware that there might be a fee associated with an online transaction. We actually use PayPal Giving Fund, which doesn't charge any fees at all because they are the nonprofit side of PayPal. The difference in using them, just so you're aware from a how it works perspective, they're their own nonprofits. So when people give a gift through PayPal Giving Fund, they're technically giving to PayPal Giving Fund. And then PayPal is sending you a grant of the same amount afterwards. So the gift in that sense does not go directly to you, but you get the full amount of it, if that makes sense. So just being clear on that language if someone asks if that's the route you choose to go. Using social media responsibly. So there are theological and ethical implications to social media. These are things that we don't necessarily like to think about because of the usefulness of the platform, but it's worth mentioning. I'm not telling you not to use it, but it is worth mentioning. There are, when you think about it, some very big ethical concerns associated with different social media platforms. Think about Facebook and some of the misinformation and divisiveness and different things like that that's present on that platform. How social media platforms are catered towards looking inwardly at yourself and presenting yourself, and the world is all about you. There's some ethical and theological things associated with that. So having that conversation about what is naturally present on this platform, because there are good things present on the platforms too. They're meant, in a sense, to build community, and that's a good thing. But being aware of both the intentional things you're trying to do with it and the unintentional problems that are associated with it. It's good to be aware of both sides and make a good decision on how you're using it based on that. Because that is present on every platform, like the YouTube thing, for instance. An ad for something very unchristian could pop up after a video, and are you okay running that risk? So just things to think about, and there were conversations worth having. So if someone brings it up at a later time, you have an answer prepared to say why you still use it. Yeah.
Make your own music.
Well, and copyright's its own kind of beast in a sense, in that a lot of the times for churches, it's one of those things that, like, there is a clause that's free usage for certain things, and in a sense, some religious content or creative usage is permitted under copyright law without attributing it to the owner or stuff like that. Churches a lot of times, especially historically, would take that and run with it and kind of use whatever the heck they wanted to use it under the free usage policy, and that's not how it actually works. And I mean, there's the ethical side of things of you are stealing content from people to use it if you're doing it in that way. So being aware of what's right and what's not right. So for instance, with music, if you're using pre-recorded music, you have to have some sort of copyright licensing to do that on a live stream. If you are recording music that is made internally from a band or something like that, that's yours, even if it's a copyrighted song. You still have to have the copyright for the lyrics of the song, but you don't have to have the copyright for the recording. If it's a old hymn that's in the public domain, you don't have to have anything. You can just play it and use it however you would like. So there's different levels to it that are good to be aware of, but it does take some feels like a lot of digging sometimes to figure those things out in a legal perspective. But that's another one of those ethical conversations to have. You can't just say this is good for Christian purpose and teaching purpose, so I'm going to use it and not care who I'm taking it from. So, like I said earlier, social media content can be at a lower quality than website content because, if you look on social media, 99% of the things you see are recorded from a phone, or a picture taken from a phone or something like that. So it's expected. People expect it in that realm to be phone recordings and not really professionally made. In fact, if your channel is full of only professionally made content, people can perceive it as you're putting up a front in a sense. Social media, it is good to incorporate phone videos and different things like that. Just to think of it as you're just sharing fun little moments with your congregation, or you're communicating different events or different things like that. So think about what your purpose is. You don't have to do, you probably shouldn't do the same thing on every different social media account. Your posts on Facebook might have one purpose, and your posts on Instagram might have another. And if you still use Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, that would have a completely different purpose. So think about what are you using each platform for, and use it accordingly. For instance, on Instagram, it was built with the idea of being image and video driven. So people are looking for visuals. Your content on Instagram should be very visual. Facebook, on the other hand, you can incorporate more text, you can incorporate links, different things like that. So it doesn't have to be, it's still good to have a lot of image driven content, but it doesn't have to be, like, that's not necessarily what people are expecting. Reels are another side of things that are good to incorporate, and I think all of the major platforms now incorporate them as well. And those can be a lot of behind the scenes stuff, or like showing what's happening at your event and different things like that. Come up with a strategy. There's a lot of different social media channels, and it can have a lot of different purposes. So it's good to have a strategy for how your church is going to approach each channel, what type of content you're going to push out there, how often you're going to push it out, different things like that. So coming up with a social media strategy, you can either come up with it yourself, you can work with a consultant on it. There's a bunch of different directions you can go with that, but it's good to have a strategy. Otherwise, you're just kind of posting content irregularly and as it comes. And most of the algorithms for social media platforms are based off of consistency in some sense. So have one or a small number of people manage the profiles. Same with website. You don't want a lot of people to have access to social media, your social media account, because whoever has access can generally post whatever they want to post. They can answer whatever questions people are commenting and all sorts of things. And I've heard stories of people who have engaged in intense theological debates over social media on a very public way on a church's profile, which is never good. So be careful of that. So this is just for y'all to think about for yourself for a second. And the third part of this will have you think a little bit more about this. But how are you using social media? How do you want to use social media? What kind of purposes do you see it having for your church context? All right. Integrating a live stream. So, like I said, it'll most likely be hosted by another platform, like Vimeo, YouTube, Restream. Restream is one of those, what we would call a simulcast platform. Basically, you're either live streaming straight from there and it's pushing it to several different other platforms, or you're doing it as the second step where, like if you're using ProPresenter, you'd stream from ProPresenter to Restream, and Restream would disperse it to all of your different accounts. So those are kind of some of your options that you could use. It may involve additional costs. YouTube and Facebook are both free for live streaming. A lot of the other platforms are going to cost something. And generally the ones that do cost something give you either more control or they operate a little better, or different things like that. So it can involve additional costs. It doesn't have to, but it can. Do what you can for your church. If all you can do is put an iPhone on a stand and stream straight to Facebook, then do that. it's something that, like I said, people are starting to really want to be able to see that, and giving a person an option to, even if it's lower quality, see what your church service looks like will make them more likely to, if it's in line with what they're looking for, come visit and actually experience it, than if they don't have that option at all. Granted, if it's completely unwatchable, that can actually hurt you. So if you're putting something on your website, try to make sure it's at least like the audio is legible, people can understand what's being said or heard, and they can actually see to an extent what's happening. So there is a baseline to an extent, but you don't have to pay $200,000 for upgraded audio equipment just to put a live stream on your website. Live streaming allows visitors to preview your worship service on your website. From a visitor's perspective, this is all you're really hoping to do, is let them see what your worship is like, so that they kind of have that invitation to come and experience it if they want to know more about your church. From a member perspective, some people do choose to be remote members nowadays, so that is a factor as well. Most of the time, if you don't have a very good live stream, that's not a big factor, because people aren't going to choose to be a remote member if their live stream is not very good. But if you do have a pretty good live stream, then you probably will have a decent amount of remote members. And at that point, it's good to have that conversation of who is ministering to these remote members and building some sort of structure for that. Make it easy to find and access. Like everything else on your website, if someone's looking for it, they should be able to find it within a few clicks. So think about where people might naturally look for that and make it pretty easy to find. Online giving. Choose the right platform for your church. If it makes sense to bundle it with your church management software that you already have, do that. If it makes sense to just incorporate it with what's already on your website hosting platform, then that makes sense for you. I'll do that. If you're setting it up through PayPal or Square or any of the plethora of online giving platforms, just do what makes the most sense for your church. Like I said, if you can bundle it with church management software and you either already have it or you're looking to get it, that's a good direction to go. I know a lot of churches kind of have that conversation at the same time and just knock them both out, and that's completely fine to do. It makes things a lot easier in a sense. Be aware of fees. Like I talked about, there are fees associated with most online giving platforms. They rarely will be more than 3% of the purchase or of the gift, but that 3% is still a pretty significant amount when you're talking about a church who needs everything that they're being given. So that is something to be aware of as well. But it does make a huge difference. So it's a balance of maybe you have to offer it on a platform that is taking a percentage off, but you're also receiving gifts that you were never going to get otherwise. So think about what it could do for your church and how your baseline giving could be impacted as well, just by offering it, and balance that with the idea of online giving. When Parable Media started out, we only sent out, we only took money by check. People had to send us checks. We didn't have any online payment platform set up because we didn't want to deal with the fees. After half a year, we decided it made a lot more sense to offer online payments as an option, because people were more willing to send it in a timely manner, and we needed the money to operate. So it's a balance of what you need versus what they're taking, in a sense. And like I said, there are options that don't take fees, so you can explore those as well. All right, search engine optimization. This is kind of a brief overview. We're not going to get into the nitty gritty because you could teach a whole class on this, but we'll talk about enough so you have a general idea. So this basically is how search engines recognize and present the information associated with your church. So the idea that most people are trying to do with it is make sure that their church appears higher on the search engine results, or as high as it possibly can on whatever search engine that they know their congregants are using, or people who might be looking for their church are using. it's manipulating a bunch of different factors in order to do that, but that's kind of the core of it, is you're just trying to get more prime location on the search results for your church or organization. So in that sense, the text on your website, on every page of your website, is usually broken into several different categories. One category is a header. Usually these are your larger fonts. They're usually used as titles or something like that. On the back end, they're usually broken into something called H1 or header 1, H2, header 2, H3, header 3. Some will go down as far as H4, but they're different levels of headers. And then outside of that, you have body text, which is usually just the general smaller text on a person's website. Headers do have an impact on how a search engine reads your web page. H1 has the highest impact. H4 has a lower impact than H2 or 3. So it's kind of tiered like that. The general idea is the things that you think people are searching to find your church or might search to find your church are the ones that you want to prioritize as the header 1s and the header 2s. If you think someone's going to search for Baptist church in Wendell, and you're a church in Wendell, you probably want Baptist church in Wendell, those specific words, to be in a header 1 somewhere on your website. So you're kind of manipulating what you think people are going to use as search terms and placing them in different spots on your website in these headers. A search engine will still read the body text. So all of the words are still read in some way, shape, or form. So you still can put information that's relevant and present across your website, but the highest impact is your headers. Everybody with me there? All right. There is something called alternative text or alt text. This is associated with images and videos. This is the information, a search engine, rather than, it's obviously not going to watch your video and it's not going to look at your image because it doesn't necessarily have eyes. This is what tells it what that image contains or what that video is. So basically you're using keywords to describe that image or that video. And what this does is when people are looking at Google Images, the Images tab on a Google search or Video tab on a Google search, it helps Google curate or Bing curate that to show images or videos that are associated with your church if that's what people are searching for. So if you're using this well, if people are looking for images of like spiritual formation content or something like that, and you do a good job keywording the alt text on your images, then your church's images might pop up pretty relevantly for people to see that, and then they might go down the rabbit trail of, oh, I'm going to look at this church now, all that kind of stuff. So it's just another way to reach people that's not necessarily on the normal search engine side of things, but it does matter for search engine optimization. Align your text with each page's purpose. Like I said, text in general does have some sort of impact on how the search engine will read your page. So have it all aligned with the purpose of that page. Your children's ministry page should have text that talks about children's ministry. And that way Google knows to that page is about children's ministry, and that's what it will portray as in the search engine. So that's good to know. Use tags where appropriate. So some aspects of your website are taggable. These are keywords that you include to different things that are specific to search engines. So most people won't see these. Blogs are a big one that uses this. Videos and some web platforms use this as well. But you're basically looking at the content and you're associating certain keywords that when a person searches, you think will point them back to that content. Utilize Google Search Console. So there is something called Google Search Console that you can create a free username or connect with it for free. And you basically, if you own the domain, you can associate that domain with Google Search Console. What that does is it prompts Google Search Console to read your website. So you're telling it that this website's ready, you want it read, and you want it regularly read. So it helps Google recognize your website and kind of see all that is. The good thing about that is they will send you tips on what's hurting sometimes your search engine results. They might send you a tip of there's text too close to an image, so you might want to reformat it. They might send you a tip that some of your text is too small for people to read. These are things that are impacting how Google is listing your site, so it's good to listen to them most of the time. So that's always good to sign up for. It's helpful. It's easy. Just Google Search Console, and it'll pop up. There's a Google thing called Google Business. If you ever search for an organization and you see like the card-looking thing on the side pop up that shows like a picture and some of the basic like contact information and website and all that kind of stuff, that's a Google Business profile. That is something you do have to sign up for. So it doesn't automatically happen most of the time. Sometimes it might seem like it automatically happens because I think almost anyone can make those profiles, but it is something that you have to create. Again, it's free, so and it highly impacts your search engine results. So it is a big factor. I would argue more so probably than your headers being well done. But always create those profiles, update it with the relevant information. It'll ask you things like for pictures, a general description of your organization, and like when you're open, when you're not, those kind of things. But create that. It'll help a lot with your search results. One thing to note about that is they are accessible to pretty much anyone. It's not super regulated, so almost anyone can post a picture to it. They don't have to have ownership on it. You can argue if you think the picture is not relevant or needs to be taken down. You can contact Google and argue it, but that is a big problem with it, is that people can do whatever with it. Google does moderate it, so like you're not going to have inappropriate stuff posted. So that I wouldn't worry about that. But like someone might post random pictures that you haven't posted yourself, and you might see something pop up, and people can suggest edits, and if Google thinks it's a correct edit, they'll do it without telling you. So just be aware of those kind of things with the Google Business profile. Links on other websites also matter. So the more links going to your website from other places, the more important Google deems your website is. So if you have a link through your denominational body's website, or through a nonprofit you support, or through your Facebook profile or other social media profiles, have as many links as you can from other places, and that helps with your search results as well. It takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. Like we're now the top result for people searching for digital media most of the time in Raleigh, and one of the top results for Charlotte for some reason. I'm not really sure how that happened. But it took all of 4 years to get there. So it does take a significant amount of time to build that. The good news is if you've been around for a while and have had a website for a while, you've still built that up. You don't lose it. So even if you redesign your website, transfer to a different platform, as long as you keep your domain, your search engine optimization that you've built follows you. So it doesn't just disappear. So you're not going to lose the work that you've done. Keywords, as you wanted to address, keywords are things that you can associate with your website, and it's really about predicting what people are going to be naturally searching for. You can sign up for a Google Ads profile. They offer a nonprofit version. If you get approved by you have to go through an approval process or whatever, but if you get the nonprofit version, you don't have to pay anything for it. They give you the equivalent of like $320-something a day's worth of advertising through it, if you're approved. You do have to meet minimum standards in the sense that your click-through rate, CTR is what it would be abbreviated as, has to meet a certain percentage for them to keep you on there. Otherwise, like if you sit at like 0.1% for 3 months, they probably will deactivate your profile. But it is something you can apply for. It's very complex and takes some getting used to, but they do give you a lot more in-depth information on what you can do to pick better keywords, pick negative keywords, which is the opposite line of thinking of these are things that people search for that don't associate with our website, so we don't want our website to appear with that. And you can associate all that with your website on the back end. But that's a whole nother ballgame and takes a lot of digging into to get used to. But that is something good to be aware of. If you don't have the nonprofit, or if you're not approved for the nonprofit side of things, it is quite expensive. So I don't naturally recommend it for most churches, because most of the time, even without it, a church that has an active presence online will eventually get to the spot where if you search for churches in this area, they'll be one of the top results just by naturally having a presence. And that's usually what you want as a church for search engine. But if you want to take that next step, that is an option. They do, in their approval process, they look at your current site, so you have to have a good, by their standards, current website. It has to operate well and make sense. So you do have to pass that test in order for them to, and I think you have to have a certain baseline traffic for them to approve you. So you do, like if you have a really bad website with no traffic, you're not going to get it. But that is, like I said, something to be aware of. All right. Artificial intelligence. That's the keyword of the past couple years, seems like. A big thing with AI, it can be extremely useful in a lot of different ways. It's not perfect, and it should never be the final result, ever. So from a text perspective, if you're using it to help you create textual content that's going to go on a website or as a social media post, use it as the first draft or the starting point, and have it generate that first initial thinking phase so you have something to work with. If you're like me, it's hard to come up with something from a zero starting point. Especially like when I'm writing blogs, the first 2 sentences are always by far the most difficult. So just having a starting point to work from can be extremely helpful to go from. You still know your church the best. AI does not. Even if it can fake knowing your church really well, it does not know your church the best. So like I said, you can get started with the process, but then you need to really edit to make it fit who you are. Give as much detail as you can in your prompts. So there's a bunch of different AI platforms. Every major company, digital company, it seems now has some sort of inclusion of it. The easiest ones to access and utilize still are probably the ones that are associated with the search engines you naturally use. So Google Gemini is one. Microsoft has one that I'm not sure of what its name is. ChatGPT is kind of the original that started the whole craze. All of those you can generally do free profiles to some extent. And the key with working with it is your prompts. So you're telling it what you want it to do, more or less. The more detail you can give in those prompts, the more accurate it's going to be to what you want it to do. So you could tell it, create a overview paragraph of a children's ministry in a Baptist church. That'll give you one thing. You can tell it, you can add in the demographics of your church. That will change the answer. You can add in the location of your church. That will change the answer. So the more detail you give it, the more accurate it will be for your church. Still don't use that as the final result. Still edit it. But you can get a pretty good starting point if you use it well with good prompts. They offer AI website builders, which is particularly relevant to this course, I guess. I've played around with them a little bit. I have found that they're not quite there. So they are options and they're growing options, but it's still, AI in general can still be a little wonky sometimes. Just be aware of that if you try to delve into it. Images generated by a lot of AI software are not copyrighted. Some AI software will say that they own all of the images that are created by their software. Google Gemini does not, so whatever you create through it is not copyrighted content. It's an easy way if you need a certain image of a certain thing and you can describe it well enough for AI to generate that image, it's an easy way to get that done without having to worry about copyright laws and who to attribute and all that kind of stuff. So I use it for that on occasion. And I have found Gemini to usually be a pretty good option with that. It'll eventually get there after a bit of conversation with the software. So, like I said, don't overuse it. So use it for what it is, a good tool to get you started on certain things. Even from a sermon writing perspective, you can use it to curate resources for you to look at. Don't have it write your sermons. For a sermon, I probably wouldn't even have it write a first draft. I would just tell it to curate useful resources that I could possibly look into that would help me think about a certain topic. So I don't have to do a Google search for all of those. But just be a little careful with it. So other tools that are useful in this conversation of an online presence, TechSoup is a really good one. They are a nonprofit themselves, and their whole purpose is to they get software donated to them for them to disperse at very discounted rates to other nonprofits. So if you're a nonprofit registered with them with a profile, then you can get things like QuickBooks, for instance. You can get a QuickBooks profile for $80 a year for their Plus option, which is a significant discount from, I think their normal one is over like $200 or $300. So they offer a wide range of different softwares for very discounted rates. You can actually get hardware like laptops and things like that at discounted rates. So they're a good thing to know about. I think the approval process is you just send your 501c3 letter or a picture of it to them, and they approve you. So it's pretty easy. Google Ads, like I mentioned earlier, they have a nonprofit option. If you want to go that route, they are worth exploring. Just know that it can be pretty complex and take some time to dig into. You can set up a self-monitoring ad that picks its own keywords and does all that kind of stuff if you want to be hands-off with it. But that is a good option to explore if you want to get into that. Canva, for building graphics, visuals, all that kind of stuff, is a very good option. I know they have a free nonprofit version, and they're extremely useful with generating graphics quickly and different things like that. Other softwares, just so y'all are aware, the software sometimes will break it into nonprofit versus church. So like we use Monday.com for our kind of our project management side of things. They have a free nonprofit option, but not a free church option. So if they deem you a religious institution, you are no longer able to get the free version of it. Some softwares will do that, especially if they don't want to affiliate with churches or denominations or anything like that. So if you see one that offers or advertises free nonprofit stuff, just be aware it might not always be available for churches, just because churches are kind of their own thing. Maintenance. So you have a website, whether you have a new one or not, you still have to maintain it. Some platforms do limit your ability to self-manage. These are usually when you're working with a different organization or website design company or something like that. They usually lock a few things behind different walls of security. Generally, the idea behind that is they either want you to have to pay them to do things, or they use websites to show to other clients, and they want it to be at a certain standard that they don't want the end client to mess up. Sometimes you don't have all of the ability you might want to self-manage your website. Just be aware of that, depending on your platform. You should always have a small number of people, or one person, depending on how big your website is, to oversee all changes and updates so they align with the ministry of the church. That person should have some sort of ministerial background. You want someone who knows the purpose of your church very well, the ministries of your church very well, to have those final calls on text and picture edits. You don't want just anybody doing that. Same with social media. It doesn't have to be the same person, but you do want someone kind of having eyes on it before it goes live. Websites should be maintained regularly. If your website looks like it hasn't been touched in 3 years, your church, in a sense, looks like it hasn't been active for 3 years to some people. Websites should be maintained. And an easy way to show that your church is active and growing and doing ministry is by updating pictures. And that's probably the best way, is updating pictures, but also text and different things like that. So they should be maintained fairly regularly. Don't expect a minister to add it to their plate without removing something else. This is a big one I see in a lot of churches, especially small staff churches. Website has to be done. It's a big job, and it's also a job that a lot of people don't understand how big it is until they start doing it themselves. So a lot of the times they get shoved on one person on staff who's already got 17 other things to do, whether it's a senior pastor, youth minister, or something else. They have a full-time job that they already had, and then the website just gets added to it. That should not happen unless you take something off their plate as well. It's not being a good minister to your church staff if you are overworking the ministers on your staff. And it's from a minister's health standpoint. Websites are big jobs, and it's something that you can't just expect to add. This might mean having a volunteer team manage it, and a minister just having the end approval for stuff that's already created, to cut down on the time spent on it. It might mean hiring a part-time person to do it, that be their only job. It might mean hiring a full-time person to do it as their only job. But just be aware of what your ministers are already doing and what their capacity is, and don't put too much on them. Or yourself, because a lot of pastors are really bad about that too. It takes a lot of time to work on a website, especially if you're not familiar with website design or that world of things. Something that a part-time person who is very used to website stuff can do in 5 minutes might take you an hour. And it's not any knock on you, it's just you're not used to doing that. That's another thing to take into account of how valuable is your time in the things that you could be doing for the rest of your ministry, versus how much time are you spending that's not really necessary to spend on a website if someone could do it significantly faster. So it might be worth paying somebody something every month to maintain your website if they can do it what takes you an hour in 5 minutes. So that's also something to factor into that conversation.